Chapter 3504. During the time they spent together, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had shown a lot of strength. As Outer Palace disciples, they were taken care of by Master Long. In the end, they were treated as a thorn in the side of all the Outer Palace disciples and were targeted everywhere. Now, in the process of getting along with the Inner Palace disciples, although they felt that it was very good, it was not a good thing to show off too much. The hunter shoots the bird that sticks out. If their performance was too outstanding, it was very likely that they would be targeted by their opponents. Unless they had a firm foothold in Penglai Palace and had enough status, all these problems would naturally disappear. As a new cultivator, it was best to be neither servile nor overbearing. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was not dead set, Ren Ziheng's eyes couldn't help but brighten. He quickly said, "Then I'll have to trouble Junior's sister. If you have these explosives, you must help me keep them. No matter what the price, I can accept it." Although the outside world and Penglai Island were quite far away, some cultivators would still go back from time to time. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were like this. "Junior sister Bailey, don't forget about me. I also need this explosive." Chu Jinfeng followed closely. He had seen the benefits of this explosive. He must not give up such a good opportunity. Yes. Junior sister Bailey, me too. Help me get one too. Me too. Everyone spoke out one after another. They just wanted to get familiar with Bailey Hongzhuang. This kind of life-saving trump card, everyone wanted to have it. Even if they were not facing skeletons, as long as they were in a dangerous situation, they could often achieve unexpected results by throwing this explosive. Looking at everyone's anxious appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded repeatedly and said, "If I have the explosive, I will definitely inform everyone." It was not until Bailey Hongzhuang said this sentence that everyone was relieved. Shangguan Yingying and the others could not help but look at each other. There was a trace of a smile in their eyes. I finally realized that Hongzhuang is a money tree. No matter what you bring out, it will sell like hotcakes. Shangguan Yingying's eyes flashed with amazement. They just came to this training ground by chance. First, they learned that Bailey Hongzhuang's healing medicine had a good effect on the injuries caused by skeletons. This had already determined that the healing medicine would sell well. Usually, explosives were completely neglected. Who would have thought that it would become a treasure that everyone was fighting over? Looking at the situation, if this explosive was taken out, the price would definitely rise. Not only that, it was likely that the supply would still exceed the demand. She could imagine what kind of situation it would be at that time. Just this Penglai Palace alone could reach such a level. Presumably, it would also be fought over by other forces. That situation was truly... Xiren nodded in agreement. Beichen has really found a rich woman. In this situation, Hongzhuang will not starve to death no matter where she is. On the contrary, she can mix with the wind and water. But we are different. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. His handsome face was filled with a proud and evil smile. "My wife is naturally not an ordinary person. You can be envious and jealous. Your skin is getting thicker and thicker." Xiren shook his head speechlessly. "Can you be any more shameless?" Di Beichen thought for a moment and said, "You don't have the life to be kept." Chapter 3505. Renzime, I won the bet this time. You can't go back on your word when we get back. Chu Jinfeng smiled and looked at Renzime, who was not far away. His long eyebrows were slightly raised and his handsome face was full of ridicule. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at Renzime. Speaking of which, the cause of this matter was still them. If Chu Jinfeng hadn't chosen to believe them, then naturally, this matter wouldn't have happened. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still very satisfied with helping Chu Jinfeng and Renzime to advance to the next step. Looking at Chu Jinfeng's proud appearance, Renzime's pretty face showed a touch of stubbornness and said, "When did I go back on my word?" "No problem." "Ha, that's good." Chu Jinfeng's eyes lit up. Usually, it wasn't easy for him to ask Renzime out. Just thinking about it made him not know how to open his mouth. Now, he finally had such a good opportunity. The most important thing was that after learning from Xiren, he found that what he did before was indeed not enough. He hoped that this time, he could make a breakthrough. It's too early for you to be happy. There is still a day before we go back. Who knows if something unexpected will happen tonight? Rinzime wasn't as optimistic as Chu Jinfeng. What happened last night made her feel a lingering fear. As long as they didn't go back, none of them could guarantee that they would live until then. As Rinzime's voice fell, everyone's expression became very complicated. This was also the problem they were most worried about. I hope that we can get through tonight safely. Our team really can't afford to be tossed around again. Shangwan Yingying sighed. She hadn't seen the skeleton army before. Just listening to Run Zime and the others' description, she was a little unconcerned. However, after seeing all this with her own eyes, she knew how terrible the night here was. If possible, she never wanted to see these annoying guys again. This kind of battle formation was completely surrounded. There was no place to escape. She really didn't want to experience it again. Everyone nodded. Their team had already shrunk by nearly half. If something like this happened again tonight, then none of them would be able to bear it. We won't go back to our previous place tonight. Let's stay in this cave. It's safer with a cave entrance. Ren Ziheng said. All right. Just as everyone was chatting, a voice suddenly entered everyone's ears. Ren Ziheng, why are you here? Hearing this unexpected voice, everyone immediately looked outside the cave. They saw a group of cultivators standing outside the cave, looking curiously at Ren Ziheng's group. Seeing the sudden appearance of the team, Ren Ziheng was stunned for a moment before a joyful smile appeared on his face. Duan Huali, why are you here? Duan Huali chuckled. Originally, we planned to go back the next time the teleportation array opens, but we have a lot of injured people in our team, so we might as well take this opportunity to go back. With that said, Duan Huali also noticed the large number of skeletons outside the cave. He couldn't help but ask, were you attacked last night? Why are there so many skeletons outside this cave? Chapter 3506. Rin Ziheng nodded with a serious expression on his face. There was indeed a battle last night, and the situation was completely beyond our imagination. Seeing Rin Ziheng's serious expression, Duan Huali couldn't help but retract his smile, and a serious expression emerged on his face. What happened? Looking at your expression, the situation doesn't seem to be ordinary serious. Yesterday, for deep pits actually appeared here. This is something that has never happened before. This is a safe zone, Ren Ziheng said. For deep pits? Duan Huali raised his voice. His face was filled with disbelief. Did I hear wrongly? If 4 deep pits appeared, how did you all survive? Duan Huali was a little suspicious. Usually, it was already very difficult for everyone to deal with a single deep pit. If 4 deep pits appeared, there was no other result other than a complete wipeout. However, Ren Ziheng and the others were obviously safe and sound. Although there were many injured people in the team, Ren Ziheng was originally responsible for taking care of the injured people this time, so it was normal for there to be injured people in the team. Speaking of which, we were lucky. We did our best to last until dawn. Ren Ziheng sighed. The situation last night was still vivid in his mind. He was very clear in his heart that if it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique that coincidentally countered the Lich's chanting, it was basically impossible for them to survive. It was precisely because of this that he was very grateful to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 4 Outer Hall disciples who accidentally came here. Speaking of which, he was really thankful that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 accidentally came here. If they didn't come here, they would have most likely lost their lives by now. If 4 deep pits appeared, there should be a lich, right? Duan Huali still didn't believe what Ren Ziheng said. Not to mention bringing a group of injured people. Even if he brought a group of cultivators in excellent condition, it would only lead to a dead end under such circumstances. He only felt that Ren Ziheng was making up a story. Could it be that he wanted to use this method to show how powerful he was? Of course, Ren Ziheng's expression was serious. 4 liches appeared last night, and we discovered that one of them seems to have evolved. The influence of its chanting is stronger than the others. I'm afraid we'll have to report this news when we get back. Liches have evolved, so we'll have to be more careful in the future. Following Ren Ziheng's words, Duan Huali and the other cultivators in Duan Huali's team all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Rinziheng, what you're saying is too far-fetched. If there were 4 liches, you wouldn't have survived. Duan Huali couldn't help but shake his head. This kind of thing could deceive people who had never seen a lich before, but it was impossible to deceive them. They often fought with the skeleton army, so they understood it very well. No matter how they thought about it, they knew that it was impossible. What my big brother said is the truth. If we didn't see the situation last night with our own eyes, I'm afraid no one would believe it. Rinzime didn't feel that Duan Huali's behavior was strange. In fact, if they didn't personally experience the scene last night, they wouldn't believe it even if others told them. Chapter 35:07. Rinzime, what you said doesn't make any sense at all. It's really hard to believe. Indeed, usually, when a team encounters a deep pit, it will be very troublesome. Your team is full of injured people. Although you have more people, facing 4 skeletons and 4 liches in the pit, no matter what, you won't be able to last until dawn. Don't tell me that you are too happy to see us, so you deliberately made up a joke with us? The practitioners in Duan Huali's team looked at Rinziheng and the others with a smile. Obviously, they didn't believe what they said at all. Seeing this, Rinziheng and Runzime looked at each other. The two of them didn't intend to continue talking. Since the other party already thought that they were joking, no matter what they said, the other party wouldn't believe them. Wasting more words would only be a waste of time. If you don't believe it, then forget it. Rinziheng waved his hand and continued, since you're planning to go back tomorrow, then you might as well go back together. It will be safer at night. Duan Huali nodded. Of course, that's no problem. I hope that we can still encounter the situation you said at night, so that we can broaden our horizons. Ha! Hearing the mockery in Duan Huali's words, Rinziheng and the others were too lazy to say anything more. Then you should also find a place to rest in the cave. I hope that tonight will be safe. How can that be? Duan Huali shook his head. It would be best if 4 liches appeared. We have never seen such a grand occasion before. Shangguan Ying looked at Duan Huali at the entrance of the cave and couldn't help but frown. Why does this Duan Huali speak with such mockery? It makes people feel uncomfortable. Chu Jinfeng chuckled. This guy's always been self-righteous. As long as he hasn't seen it before, he will think that it is impossible. You just have to get used to it. In the inner hall, there are many arrogant people like him. So you're saying that this Duan Huali is very strong? Xiren asked curiously. Chu Jinfeng nodded. Although I despise this guy's character, I have to say that he is indeed very strong. It is because he is strong that he always speaks with a bit of arrogance. In the inner palace, those with strength have the right to be arrogant. However, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. There are too many people who are unhappy to look at, so we just ignore them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other. In a place like this, there were all kinds of people. The more powerful a person was, the more they thought they were the best. This kind of situation was human nature. From the conversation between Duan Huali and Rinziheng, it was clear that Duan Huali was somewhat disdainful of Rinziheng. Rinziheng was too lazy to explain later on, which also showed that Rinziheng was not the same kind of person. That's true. There are all kinds of birds in the sea. Shangguan Ying shrugged her shoulders. No matter where one was, there would always be people who could hit it off with them. At the same time, there would also be people who could not stand the sight of them. With the addition of Duan Huali and the others, everyone felt a bit more at ease. Originally, there were too few people in their group, so they couldn't help but worry. However, now that there were more people, even if they were unlucky and encountered danger again, at least they had a chance to survive. Chapter 35:08. Stunning. This was Duan Huali's first impression when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang. He had never seen such a stunning woman. Her skin was whiter than snow, and her temperament was noble as if she was carved by God. Her perfect face was flawless. Even the most ordinary clothes of Penglai Palace revealed a completely different beauty and brilliance on her body. It was unforgettable. However, Duan Huali quickly recovered. He was far from losing his composure like an ordinary pig. After looking carefully, Duan Huali couldn't help but ask Ren Ziheng, "These people look very unfamiliar. Are they disciples who just joined the inner hall?" Seeing that Duan Huali noticed Bailey Hongzhuang and others at a glance, Ren Ziheng was not surprised. In fact, with the temperament of Bailey Hongzhuang and others, it was difficult to ignore them no matter where they were. They are not inner hall disciples. Duan Huali was slightly stunned. Not inner hall disciples? What does that mean? They're outer hall disciples who just joined, but they were tricked and came to the wrong teleportation circle. You know, Ren Ziheng raised his eyebrows. They had heard of this kind of thing. As long as he said it, he believed that Duan Huali would understand. I see. Duan Huali suddenly understood. So, didn't they also experience the battle last night? Yes, although the four of them are still outer hall disciples, their performance last night was very outstanding. I believe it won't be long before they become inner hall disciples. Ren Ziheng's eyes were full of appreciation. When he went back tomorrow, he would tell the inner hall mentors about the excellent performance of Bailey Hongzhuang and others. He believed that the mentors would also look at them in a new light. As long as they got the mentors' attention, it would also be excellent for the future development of Bailey Hongzhuang and others in Penglai Palace. Oh, Duan Huali's eyebrows showed a touch of surprise. It's rare to see you praise cultivators so much. This proves that they are really outstanding. Ren Ziheng smiled faintly. Duan Huali slowly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. His handsome and extraordinary face was still filled with arrogance as he smiled faintly. I heard that although the four of you are outer palace disciples, your performance in dealing with the skeletons last night was very outstanding. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but feel surprised when they saw Duan Huali's attention land on them. They originally had no intention of interacting with Duan Huali. Senior brother, you flatter us. We're just trying our best to do what we should do, Di Beichen said slowly. Duan Huali glanced at Di Beichen. He had already noticed Di Beichen's existence. In fact, the four of them were very good-looking and would be noticed at a glance. Junior brother, you're too humble. Usually, outer palace disciples are unable to return after coming to the wrong place. The fact that you're able to last until today is already proof that you're not bad. Duan Huali laughed softly with a hint of ridicule in his voice. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's expressions didn't change, but their hearts were faintly unhappy. Inexplicably, such a guy had come in front of them to show off his might. This was not something that made them feel happy. Junior sister, how do you address me? Duan Huali asked. As soon as these words came out, Di Beichun and Xiren could not help but look at each other. They already understood the purpose of Duan Huali's visit. Chapter 3509. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude towards him was extremely cold, and she did not show any enthusiasm even though he was an inner palace disciple, Duan Huali was somewhat dissatisfied. With his status in the inner palace, he had always had hundreds of responses. Many women wanted to become his woman, but he usually did not take a fancy to them. Generally speaking, he only needed one look, and the other party would take the initiative to approach him. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude to be so cold. It was really beyond his expectations. So, it's Junior Sister Bailey. Duan Huali smiled faintly. I'm Duan Huali, an inner palace disciple. In the future, if you need my help in Penglai Palace, you can tell me directly. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, Then I'll thank you in advance, Senior Brother Duan. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had only said a word of thanks indifferently, as if she did not take him to heart, Duan Huali quietly frowned. However, he did not find it too strange. After all, there were very few women who could catch his fancy. Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance was so outstanding that there must be many men pursuing her. Naturally, she would have a certain amount of arrogance. If she took the bait so easily, it would not be fun. It was this kind of indifference that made him more interested. If you want to know if Bailey Hongzhuang would still have such a cold and frosty appearance when he caught up with her. Rinzime looked at Duan Huali's behavior and could not help but have a sarcastic look in her eyes. I'm afraid that Duan Huali has taken a fancy to junior sister Bailey. Rin Ziheng glanced at Duan Huali indifferently and said, "This fits his personality very well. He usually thinks that he's elegant and charming thousands of girls. However, this time he's doomed to fail. That's good. I really want to see this guy's face when he's defeated." Rin Zimei shrugged. Every time she saw this guy's arrogant look, she could not help but want to give him a punch. Rin Ziheng frowned slightly. Junior sister Bailey is now being targeted by Duan Huali. I'm afraid that it will be troublesome. However, Duan Huali will not go too far. It shouldn't be too troublesome. Hearing Rin Ziheng's words, Rinzime immediately understood what he meant and said, "When the time comes, just tell him that junior martial sister Bailey and junior martial brother D are a couple. This guy won't continue to be so stubborn, right? Quite a number of inner palace female disciples have been harmed by him, and I feel unhappy whenever I see him. Lower your voice." Rin Ziheng lowered his voice. Although Duan Huali's character isn't that great, his strength is indeed not weak. There's no benefit in offending him. Just bear with it for a while. We're going back tomorrow anyway. Rinzime nodded. Okay. When Duan Huali saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others didn't have the slightest interest in talking to him, he also felt a little embarrassed. He usually liked to show off in front of the new disciples, and when he felt their worshipful gazes, he felt very happy. However, this time, he did not feel this from Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. Did you just become outer disciples? Duan Huali asked. Yes. When Zyra nodded, we just joined Penglai Palace. Chapter 35:10. As Duan Huali's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but look at each other. They also felt that what the former said was true. Their popularity in the outer palace could no longer be described as bad. It was completely bad to the extreme. Not to mention the cultivators who died in their hands. It was useless no matter how much they hated them, because it could not have any impact on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As for those cultivators who had lowered their cultivation because of them, they had already become a thorn in their side. In the future, when they cultivated in the outer hall, they had to be on guard all times. The slightest carelessness could cause them to be schemed against. At least, this time, they were tricked to the point that they almost couldn't go back alive. Speaking of which, they had many opponents in the outer palace, but they had no friends. Presumably, in the entire Penglai Palace, there were only a few cultivators who could do to their level. Seeing a touch of helplessness on the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Duan Huali knew that he had hit the nail on the head. Suddenly, the smile in his eyes deepened. It doesn't matter if you were tricked. After all, you will always encounter some opponents outside. If you can't solve it, I can help you solve it. Duan Huali smiled. No matter what, I still have some face in this Penglai Palace. As long as I spread the word, absolutely no one will dare to trouble you again. With that, Duan Huali's face could not help but become more arrogant. This was his influence in Penglai Palace. With his strength, everyone in the inner palace had to give him face, let alone the outer palace. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not so optimistic about this. Those guys' cultivation had dropped so much because of them. This kind of hatred, even if it was not irreconcilable, was still a deep hatred. Not to mention Duan Huali saying it. Even if Master Long stood up and said it, it would not be able to eliminate this hatred. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not regret doing all this. After all, those guys were the first to have evil thoughts about them. They deserved to be punished. Thank you for your kindness, senior brother Duan, but we should handle this kind of thing ourselves. Di Baichen looked indifferent and said indifferently. He did not have any good feelings for anyone who wanted to show off in front of his wife, let alone this extremely arrogant guy in front of him. However, this fellow's performance wasn't too excessive for the time being. Other than being a little arrogant, a little infuriating, and a little annoying, everything else was all right. Otherwise, even if the other party was an inner palace disciple, he wouldn't have let him off so easily. How should I address you, junior brother? Seeing Bei Chun acting like the backbone of the team, Duan Huali couldn't help but ask. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this guy in front of him was especially unpleasant. Perhaps it was because this guy was more handsome than him. I am Bei Chun. So it's junior brother D. Duan Huali nodded. Although the outer palace disciples are not as strong as the inner palace disciples, they should not be underestimated. I advise junior brother D not to be too arrogant. If something goes wrong, you will not be the only one involved. In fact, he had no interest in helping Bei Chin and the others solve the problem. He just wanted to show off in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 35:11. As soon as he said this, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three changed. Duan Huali's words were very impolite. It was obvious that he was targeting Bei Chin. However, Bei Chun smiled faintly and said casually, "Since I said that I can solve it, I can solve it. Senior brother Duan, you don't have to worry too much." Looking at Bei Chin's attitude, Duan Huali couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect this Bei Chun to be so arrogant to say such words to him. Junior brother D, when Chu Jinfeng saw that the situation wasn't quite right, he hurriedly walked over and said, "Duan Huali, junior brother D and the others were already very unhappy after being set up this time. Let them settle the grudges between them. Why do you need to worry about such a small matter? Once you take action, everything will be fine. After all, young people also need to experience their own experiences." Duan Huali, who was about to explode, was suddenly rebutted by Chu Jinfeng's words. However, Chu Jinfeng's words were very smooth, and it made his expression much better. Most of the foreign disciples are newborn calves who aren't afraid of tigers. This kind of arrogance will be smoothed out sooner or later. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Huali was too lazy to say anything more to Bei Chin. He directly returned to his team and sat down to rest. This guy is too shameless. Shangguan Yingying sneered. Our arrogance? The one who is too arrogant is him, right? This kind of peacock-like guy likes to spread his tail no matter who he sees. If you don't give him a chance to show off, he will naturally be very unhappy. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged. Actually, you don't have to pay attention to it at all. Just treat it as a joke. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang finished speaking, the expressions of Chu Jinfeng and the others changed. Ziren couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Hongzhuang, you really saw through Duan Huali's nature at a glance. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. Of course. Let him do his own one-man show. When it's over, he will naturally leave. If I knew that my wife was so calm, I would have just ignored him. Bei Chin smiled and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. I see that you don't intend to take care of him. At least I managed to say a few more words to him and wasted a few seconds. Then you don't need to say a word. I'll listen to my wife. On the side, Chu Jinfeng watched Bailey Hongzhuang and Bei Chun echo each other and couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Previously, he was worried that some kind of conflict would break out. It turned out that Bei Chin and the others completely treated Duan Huali as a joke. If Duan Huali knew what Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were thinking, he would probably die of anger. I have to hand it to you guys, but I also agree, haha. Chu Jinfeng laughed. In the future, you guys better stay away from Duan Huali. This guy's not a good person. Don't be fooled by his usual, sanctimonious appearance. He has done a lot of shady things behind the scenes, especially when he is interested in women. You guys have to be careful. Thinking of this, Chu Jinfeng still reminded Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Thank you for the reminder. We will be careful. A faint, complicated light flashed across Bei Chin's deep, dark eyes as he responded. Chapter 35:12. After receiving Chu Jinfeng's warning, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three felt a little complicated. Based on their interactions with Chu Jinfeng during this period of time, they had some understanding of his character. Since he could deliberately warn them, it proved that Duan Huali was indeed not someone to be trifled with. At the very least, Duan Huali's position in the inner hall was definitely higher than Chu Jinfeng's. Otherwise, Chu Jinfeng would not have taken him into consideration. Duan Huali returned to his team, still feeling a little unhappy. It was not easy to find a woman that he was interested in, but he did not expect that there would be a blind fellow who kept on causing trouble. He did not even have a chance to express himself. This feeling made him very unhappy. One had to know that with his status in the inner hall, very few people dare to speak to him like this. What? You've taken a fancy to that woman? After noticing Duan Huali's unhappy expression, Peng Kairui walked up to him and asked with a smile. Hearing Peng Kairui's words, Duan Huali raised his eyebrows. Don't you think that this woman looks very different? Compared to the goods in the inner hall, she's much better. Speaking of this, Duan Huali's eyes flashed with an evil light. He had basically seen all the outstanding women in the inner hall. Those that he had taken a fancy to would naturally not escape his grasp. During this period of time, he was worried that he would be bored. He did not expect that such a good thing would come to the outer hall. Naturally, he would not want to miss this opportunity. Looking at the intense excitement that flashed across Duan Huali's face, Peng Kairui already knew what he was thinking. He had been with Duan Huali for so long, so he could not be more familiar with the former's style. This woman's appearance is indeed outstanding. Moreover, her temperament is not something that ordinary people can compare to. Compared to your previous ones, she is indeed the most outstanding one. Not to mention you. I'm afraid that no one can ignore her. Hearing this, Duan Huali glanced at Peng Kairui indifferently and said, You have an idea too? His cold voice revealed some coldness and displeasure, but also contained some warning. Peng Kairui quickly waved his hand and said, I don't mean that. I just think that the woman beside him is very good. Hearing this, Duan Huali glanced at Shangguan Yingying, who was beside Bailey Hongzhuang, and a smile appeared in his eyes. It seems that we have the same idea. Peng Kairui revealed a meaningful smile. Isn't this good? Recently, I've been staying in this training ground and facing these skeletons. It's really boring. It's just that I can relax when I go back this time. Duan Huali and Peng Kairui looked at each other. Both of them smiled faintly, knowing what was going on. Huali Peng Yingying's his. Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali curiously. Logically speaking, with your position in the inner hall, this shouldn't happen, Duan Huali shrugged. These are just outer hall disciples who accidentally came to the wrong place. That's why they're here. It's normal that they don't know about my influence in the inner hall. When they return to the outer hall, they just need to ask around for my name, and they'll know how wrong their attitude is. Chapter 35:13. Looking at Duan Huali's confident look, Peng Kairui nodded and said, That's right. When they know your name, maybe you don't need to do anything and she will come to you directly. Ha! Duan Huali laughed heartily. That's not necessarily the case. According to my judgment, this woman is probably a proud and arrogant person. After all, with such an outstanding appearance, there must be a lot of suitors. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to get her. Oh, Peng Kairui raised his eyebrows. Don't you have enough confidence in yourself? Duan Huali raised a finger and shook it, saying, Of course I have enough confidence in myself. She will definitely become my woman. It's just that the process will be more troublesome than before. Speaking of which, I like such challenging things. If it's so easy to get, I always feel that it's a little lacking in charm. Hearing this, Peng Kairui smiled. You really are a master of love. Haha, this kind of thing is not complicated. When they need our help, all these problems will naturally be solved. Duan Huali raised his eyebrows and smiled with some pride. What do you mean? Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali with slight confusion. He didn't understand what Duan Huali meant. It's very simple. Duan Huali smiled proudly. If they don't have any trouble, then we will create some trouble for them. As long as they can't solve it, it's naturally time for us to show up. However, they have just arrived at Penglai Palace and have already been framed. From this situation, I'm afraid that we don't need to create much trouble. They have already fallen into the vortex. Peng Kairui gave Duan Huali a thumbs up. It's really a good method. It seems that you have already thought everything through. This woman is destined to be yours. Of course. Duan Huali nodded without any modesty. His face was full of confidence. Over the years, which woman that I've taken a fancy to has been able to escape from my grasp? Peng Kure thought carefully for a moment and then nodded in agreement. That's true. Among the outstanding figures in the inner palace, Duan Huali is the number one. Haha, that's not a bad name. Master, look at that smug look on Duan Huali's face. Just by looking at him, I can tell that he's up to no good. There's a wretched look on his face. Xiaohei looked at Duan Huali in the distance, her eyes filled with disgust. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang faintly glanced at Duan Huali. Indeed, she discovered that Duan Huali's face revealed a hint of a conspiracy. She frowned slightly. Let him be. Whether they were on Penglai Island or after joining Penglai Palace, these troubles were inevitable. They had already encountered a lot of trouble on Penglai Island. After coming to Penglai Palace, they did not find a safe haven. Instead, they had entered a bigger stage of competition. Therefore, she had long been prepared to fight. No matter what kind of trouble they would encounter next, she would deal with it calmly. Di Beichun and the other two did not say much. They had already seen that Duan Huali was not a good person. They only hoped that Duan Huali would not trouble them. Otherwise, they could only teach Duan Huali a lesson. Chapter 35:14. Night slowly fell. When the night once again shrouded the earth, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the cave couldn't help but show vigilant looks. Last night's incident had really left them with lingering fear. If there was another wave today, it would really be a big problem. When Duan Huali and the others saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, almost everyone showed the same vigilant look, and a strange light appeared in their eyes. All along, although Rin Ziheng and the others had emphasized to them that a big battle had happened last night, none of them took it to heart. They only thought that they were deliberately exaggerating to show off their achievements. However, the emotions that Rin Ziheng and the others were showing now really didn't seem to be faked, which made them a little curious. Duan Huali, do you think that what they said before was true? Otherwise, why would they be so vigilant? It doesn't seem normal. Peng Kairue frowned and said. Although he didn't usually have much contact with Rin Ziheng and the others, he had a certain understanding of Rin Ziheng. This reaction didn't seem to be groundless. Hearing this, Duan Huali pondered for a moment before shaking his head with a chuckle. Aren't you being a little too gullible? Forget about the both of us. Even others wouldn't believe such a thing if I were to tell them. You're right. Peng Kui nodded thoughtfully. It's just that their reaction is really a little strange. If they don't act like this, how can they scare us? Duan Huali shrugged indifferently. Recently, Rin Ziheng's achievements haven't been very good. Maybe they want to use this method to emphasize their achievements. After all, people always want to save face. When these words came out, Peng Kurue couldn't help but laugh. That's true. Recently, he has often been assigned the task of protecting injured disciples. This is really a little... It's good that you know. Duan Huali chuckled. Although Duan Huali and Peng Kurue's conversation wasn't loud, in such a quiet environment, it was still inevitable that it was heard by others. When Rinzime heard the discussion between the two of them, she couldn't help but feel angry. This was a slap to their faces. Duan Huali and Peng Kairue have gone too far. How could they speak to such an extent? Rinzime's face was filled with indignation. She was already disgusted with Duan Huali. This guy had some feelings for her before, but after being rejected by her, she was even ridiculed by this guy several times, which made her feel even more hateful. Rin Ziheng's expression was similarly ugly. There was a faint trace of anger in the depths of his eyes, but he did not show it on his face. He only patted Rin Zime's shoulder and said, "Forget it. It's not like you don't know what kind of person he is. If we really get angry with him, the ones who will be in trouble will be us. He can say whatever he wants. In any case, I'm doing the right thing, so there's no need to worry. I just don't like this guy. He always thinks he's so great, but in fact, just looking at his face makes me want to vomit." Rinzime's face was still full of displeasure. If it weren't for Duan Huali's strength, she would have already fallen out with Duan Huali, but now she had to pretend to be very good on the surface. Chapter 35:15. It's best to let them not believe it. Anyway, when we return to the inner hall, we will definitely report this matter. At that time, the mentors will also confirm whether what we said is true or not. The more they don't believe it, the more they will lose face when the mentors confirm the result. Chu Jinfeng's eyes flashed with a sinister light. He was also full of disgust for Duan Huali. After all, he had always had feelings for Ren Zimei, and Duan Huali's previous humiliation of Ren Zimei was also something he couldn't stand. If it weren't for the fact that there was a certain gap between his strength and Duan Huali's, he would have already taught this self-righteous guy a lesson. Listening to Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei's face looked better. She nodded and said, "You are right. Let this guy be self-righteous. When the time comes, he will be the one who will be slapped in the face." Yes, why should we care about what he thinks? A smile appeared on Ren Zihang's face again. I actually hope that they will witness all this with their own eyes. When that time comes, their faces will definitely be very interesting. That night, Ren Zihang's people had very complicated feelings. On one hand, they hoped that they could pass the night peacefully and return to Penglai Palace tomorrow. On the other hand, they wanted to see Duan Huali's shocked expression, so they hoped that the skeleton army would appear again. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three maintained the appearance of cultivation. After last night's incident, they understood that no matter what, they had to maintain their best state at all times. Once the skeleton army appeared, they would be able to deal with it in their best state. I hope that these skeletons will not appear again tonight. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to deal with another wave. Shangguan Yingying's face was full of prayer. Last night's experience was undoubtedly a nightmare. If they had not cooperated quite well, it was very likely that they would have been completely wiped out. She also understood why the number of inner hall disciples had always been maintained at a certain level. It was really too dangerous here. If they didn't have a certain level of strength, they would only lose their lives. Although there are more people in the team today, but in my opinion, with the arrogance of Duan Huali and the others, if a skeleton army really appears, I'm afraid it won't be easy to cooperate with them. Maybe it will be more of a hindrance. When Xiren sighed and shook his head. Sometimes, people with strength may not be able to help much because they tend to think highly of themselves and are unwilling to listen to the opinions of others. In his opinion, Duan Huali was clearly such a person. Xiren, your eye for people has become more and more accurate recently. Di Beichun gave Xiren a thumbs up. His handsome face curled up into an evil and playful smile. Beichun, are you praising me or insulting me? Xiren raised his eyebrows. Why did he feel that Di Beichun's words didn't sound right? Di Beichun gave a low laugh. I'm praising you for your progress. Time passed by minute. Everyone was waiting quietly. No one knew what would happen in the next second. Bailey Hongzhuang also warned the surroundings. As long as there was a slight movement, she would definitely notice it at the first moment. Chapter 35:16. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichun nodded and said, "Indeed, it's still calm at the moment. There are no signs of the skeleton army appearing. It would be best if the skeleton army doesn't appear tonight. We can return to the outer hall tomorrow." Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a relaxed smile. Li Shunkai had tricked them to come here in order to make them lose their lives. If they return alive, Li Shunkai and the others would be very surprised. After returning to the outer hall tomorrow, the first thing I'll do is to find Li Shunkai. I treated him as a friend, but I didn't expect him to trick us like this behind our backs. If it weren't for our good luck, we would have died here yesterday. Shangguan Yingying's eyes flickered with anger. This time, they had been tricked too miserably. Just thinking about last night's experience made her feel a lingering fear. If they had been just a little bit slower, they would have been left here forever. Looking at Shangguan Yingying's fiery appearance, Xiren said, "Okay, as long as we go back tomorrow, I'll accompany you to find Li Shunkai. I hope that guy is in the outer hall." The last time they came here to train, Li Shunkai and the others were obviously going to the training ground. They were not sure if Li Shunkai had returned after such a long time. If that guy is not in the outer hall, then I'll wait for him to appear. Unless he dies in the training ground, this matter will never end. Shangguan and Ying clench her fists. She now felt that Li Shunkai was the most hateful person. If he had been an enemy from the beginning, it would have been fine. But he had deceived them as a friend, which was the most unbearable thing. Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichun had no objections to this. This matter had to be resolved sooner or later. From the moment Li Shunkai chose to deceive them, they had already stood on the opposite side. The other party wanted to kill them, so how could they be polite? As time passed, Ren Ziheng and the others maintained a tense state. No one knew what would happen in the next moment. Compared to the nervousness of Ren Ziheng's group, Duan Huali's group appeared much calmer. Instead, they looked at Ren Ziheng's group as if they were looking at a joke. They didn't believe that so many skeletons would appear. The cave was very quiet. Everyone was looking around. If there was even the slightest movement, they would be the first to notice it. However, even as the sky gradually brightened, the wind and waves were still calm, and there were no fluctuations. Seeing the sky brighten, everyone couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Looks like we're in luck tonight. The skeletons won't appear again. Ren Ziheng heaved a sigh of relief. He really didn't want to experience what happened last night again. It would have been fine if they were fully prepared. However, their current situation was simply too difficult to deal with. A relaxed smile appeared on Ren Zimei's face. We're finally able to return safely. This time it was a close call. As she spoke, Ren Zimei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. Fortunately, the 4 of you came here by accident. Otherwise, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to survive last night. As soon as she said this, Ren Ziheng and the others also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. They also felt lucky. Chapter 35:17. Senior Sister Ren, you're praising us too much. We were just lucky. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a faint smile. Her elegant and refined features looked even more otherworldly and elegant. Although they had stumbled into this place by accident, it was still a great harvest for them. Ren Zimei waved her hand and smiled. I'm telling the truth. Seeing how everyone was praising Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, Duan Huali and Peng Kuei could not help but look at each other. A look of disdain flashed across their eyes. Ren Zimei, aren't you exaggerating a little too much? Peng Kuei slowly said, they're just 4 new disciples from the outer palace. Don't tell me that they could have turned the tide in the disaster that you're talking about. The moment these words were spoken, the cultivators behind Duan Huali all laughed out loud. Until now, they still felt as if they were watching a show. Ren Zimei and the others' praise for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had far exceeded their expectations. No matter how they looked at it, it was impossible. Hearing Peng Kuei's mocking words, Ren Zimei could not help but speak up. They did turn the tide in yesterday's matter. If it weren't for them, we would have been completely annihilated. He, Peng Kuei chuckled. The space between his brows was filled with disbelief. They're just disciples from the outer palace. How capable could they be? Ren Zimei, I think that you and your brother have been busy helping the injured recently. That's why your fighting strength and eyesight have deteriorated. Peng Kuei clicked his tongue and shook his head. His disdain could not be more obvious. A look of annoyance surfaced on Ren Zimei's face. It's your business if you don't believe me. Why you have to slander my brother and me? What you're saying is wrong. How can this be considered as slander? I'm just telling the truth. Peng Kuei chuckled and ignored Ren Zimei's anger. Looking at Peng Kuei's arrogant appearance, Ren Zimei was even more furious. Her and Ren Ziheng's recent development in the inner hall was indeed inferior to Duan Huali and Peng Kuei, but no one could tolerate being ridiculed by them for no reason. Peng Kuei, I know you've been riding the crest of success recently, but everyone has their downfall. I advise you not to be too arrogant now. After all, it's better to leave a way out for others in the future. At this moment, Ren Ziheng spoke slowly and his words were filled with warning. He didn't want to clash with Duan Huali and the others because he wanted to avoid some conflicts. However, if the other party really provoked him, he didn't lack the courage to fight back. Seeing that even Ren Ziheng was angered, Peng Kuei restrained himself slightly and said, "I was just joking. Aren't you two siblings going too far?" "Oomph." Ren Zimei snorted coldly. The coldness on her face was still obvious. She insinuated, "Some people think too highly of themselves. They think they're the best and look down on the achievements of others. One day, they'll realize that they're the frogs at the bottom of the well." As soon as these words were spoken, Peng Kairui's face turned ugly. There was a faint trace of anger. Just as he was about to explode, Duan Huali suddenly reached out and stopped him. Chapter 35:18. Duan Huali's face was brimming with a smile that was like a spring breeze, showing his grace and magnanimity. However, whether it was Ren Ziheng and the others, or Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, none of them felt that Duan Huali's words were from the bottom of his heart. After all, Peng Kairui and Duan Huali's relationship was extremely good. The two of them were obviously the same. They were all the same. So how could Duan Huali and Peng Kairui have completely different thoughts? After hearing what you said, I'm also very interested in the 4 Outer Hall disciples. If there's a chance, I'll definitely see how powerful they are. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' gazes fell on Duan Huali. It was clearly a very ordinary sentence, but to them, the meaning behind it was somewhat unusual. After Duan Huali finished speaking, he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a deep meaning. He didn't know why Ren Zimei would praise Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, but he believed that Ren Zimei must have her reasons. Since he had already taken a fancy to Bailey Hongzhuang would be his woman in the future. If he had some skills, it would undoubtedly be best. Feeling Duan Huali's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang had a somewhat ominous premonition in her heart. This Duan Huali was probably really troublesome. "Duan Huali, aren't you too good-natured? You believe everything they say." Peng Kairui sighed and shook his head. A trace of a playful smile appeared on his face. "In my opinion, the 4 deep pits that they spoke of are simply impossible. Wasn't everything fine last night?" Peng Kairui's gaze swept over Ren Ziheng and the others. "You must have seen that we haven't seen each other for a long time, so you deliberately made up a story for us to hear, right?" "That's not necessarily true. I know Ren Zixing and the others' character. I presume they wouldn't fabricate such a ridiculous story to deceive us." Duan Huali chuckled. Although Duan Huali's words sounded like he was standing on Ren Ziheng's side, one could hear the sarcasm in his words if one listened carefully. The crowd was not stupid. Just by looking at Duan Huali and Peng Kairui's expressions, they understood that they were singing the same tune and deliberately ridiculing them. Hearing the sarcasm in Duan Huali's tone, Ren Ziheng did not try to defend himself. "Recently, I have a new hobby, which is to make up stories. I especially like to make up stories that no one believes." He knew very well that Duan Huali wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to ridicule him. Rather than that, he might as well frankly say that he was making up a story, which would save him some trouble. Seeing that Ren Ziheng had given up and admitted that he was making up a story, Duan Huali was a little surprised. However, he quickly reacted and a smile appeared on his face again. He said, "Your story is indeed very well made up. If I wasn't careful, I would have thought that you were telling the truth. Thank you for the compliment," Ren Ziheng said indifferently. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the surging waves between Ren Ziheng and Duan Huali and understood that the two of them were not on good terms. Moreover, it seemed that they had been on bad terms for a long time. However, the conflict in the inner hall did not have much to do with them for the time being. Naturally, there was no need for them to say anything. "In my opinion, with Duan Huali's character, I'm afraid that he has many enemies in the inner hall," Xiren said slowly. Chapter 35:19. As long as he doesn't provoke us, we'll just pretend that we didn't see anything. Di Beichun looked indifferent, but he suddenly smiled and said, "But according to my judgment, this guy probably doesn't have good eyesight, so I'm afraid we'll have some trouble in the future." As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's face also showed a tacit smile. "I heard that his influence in the inner hall is not small. I'm afraid it'll be a challenge for us." "Wouldn't life be boring if there were no challenges?" Bewitching glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and then said, "My wife and I should both like challenges, right? Husband sings, wife follows." Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up, her eyes shining brightly. Seeing that Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang had already reached this tacit understanding, when Ziren also gave a thumbs up and sighed, "This show of affection, I give full marks." Shangwan Yingying chuckled. In the past, she rarely encountered difficulties and troubles. However, ever since she came to Punlai Island with Ziren and the others, she discovered that there were troubles and difficulties. She had never left them. Now she had long been used to it. If there were no troubles coming to her from time to time, she was afraid that she would feel a little bored. As the sky gradually brightened, everyone's mood improved. Staying in this place of experience, everyone was always a little nervous. A little carelessness could cause them to lose their lives, so they were always in a state of depression. After returning to Punlai Palace, everyone could relax. At least they didn't have to worry about the possibility of losing their lives at any time. The sky is already bright. Let's go to the transmission array. A relaxed smile appeared on Run Zimei's face. Although the appearance of Duan Huali and others affected her mood, at this moment, she was still very happy. Chu Jinfeng nodded. "Okay, after we go back, we can also have a good rest. After I choose a place, I'll treat you to a meal." Listening to Chu Jinfeng's words, Run Zimei glanced at him. Originally, she didn't like this guy, but since the appearance of Duan Huali and Peng Kerue, these two annoying guys, she felt that Chu Jinfeng was much more pleasing to the eye. "Okay," Ren Zimei responded faintly. The smile in Chu Jinfeng's eyes widened a little. According to the result of his discussion with Ziren before, if he could perform well this time, the possibility of winning the beauty's heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, one after another, they all walked in the direction of the transmission array. Duan Huali also knew that his relationship with Ren Ziheng wasn't harmonious, so the two of them maintained a certain distance when traveling together. However, in the process of walking, Bailey Hongzhuang found that Duan Huali had been walking not far from her, and his eyes fell on her from time to time, full of a bit of flirting. Duan Huali had been watching Bailey Hongzhuang. Today, when he took a closer look, he only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance was more outstanding, and her temperament could be said to be extraordinary. At a glance, he knew that she was not an ordinary woman, and she was much better than the women he had pursued before. For a time, he actually felt a little serious in his heart. Chapter 35:20. Noticing Duan Huali's invasive gaze, Di Beichun directly put his hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. At the same time, he glanced indifferently at Duan Huali, his eyes full of warning. Di Beichun's woman was not to be touched by anyone else. Even though Duan Huali's strength was not bad and he had a certain status in the inner hall, to him, this was not a deterrent at all. Anyone who had any ideas about Di Beichun's woman would definitely not have a good ending. Seeing Di Beichun's sudden action, Duan Huali could not help but be stunned. His eyes were full of astonishment. Although he already felt that Di Beichun was the backbone of Bailey Hongzhuang's team of 4, he did not know that Di Beichun and Bailey Hongzhuang had such a relationship. It was really beyond his expectations. Taking a closer look, he found that Bailey Hongzhuang was also obediently leaning on Di Beichun. The two of them looked like a perfect match. He could not help but frown. This gave him a very unpleasant feeling. Peng Kerue also noticed this scene. He was secretly surprised. He did not expect that the woman Duan Huali had his eyes on this time was already taken. "Duan Huali, it seems that your situation is not very good this time," Peng Kerue slowly said. Hearing this, Duan Huali's face turned cold. He said, "So what? As long as it is a woman that I Duan Huali like she will be mine sooner or later. Seeing that Duan Huali was still so determined after knowing the situation, Peng Kurui's eyes could not help but change a little. He then smiled and said, "Perhaps this kind of woman is more charming. He actually dared to provoke me. I will definitely let him know the price of provoking me." Duan Huali's face was gloomy. As a man, how could he not see the warning in Bewitching's eyes? Bewitching was obviously just an ordinary outer hall disciple, but he dared to provoke him. Was this not completely disregarding his dignity? If he did not teach him a lesson, how could he show his status? Duan Huali secretly thought in his heart. After returning, he must teach Bewitching a lesson so that he would know that Penglai Palace was not like the outside. He could do whatever he wanted just because he had some strength. After all, outer hall disciples were just a bunch of trash in front of inner hall disciples. However, while Duan Huali was very angry, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were completely unaware. This was because they were already thinking about how they would settle the score with Li Shengkai when they returned. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others entered the training grounds of the inner hall disciples, Li Shengkai had been worried about this matter. Although the rest of the team firmly believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would not be able to return alive, Li Shengkai was still on tenterhooks. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's performance in the outer hall was simply too frightening. Moreover, they must have their reasons for being so highly regarded by Lord Long. If they were lucky and did not fall in the training grounds of the inner hall disciples this time, he would be in trouble if they return alive. Just thinking about this possibility made him unable to eat or sleep in peace. Previously, there was no conflict between him and Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. On the contrary, they could even be considered friends. However, after this incident, he had completely offended them. Chapter 35:21. Li Shengkai, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so pale? Cheng Juanhe couldn't help but ask when he noticed Li Shengkai's complicated expression. Li Shengkai turned around, looked at Cheng Juanhe, and said, "I keep having the feeling that what we did last time wasn't right. Today is the day the teleportation formation for the inner hall disciples will be activated. If they come back alive, what should we do?" As the time drew closer, the anxiety in his heart grew stronger. If Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 really return alive, they would be in deep trouble. Cheng Juanhe couldn't help but frown when he heard Li Shengkai's words. A hint of disdain appeared in his eyes. He said, "Li Shengkai, aren't you a little too cowardly? You're actually still worried about this even now. Have you ever seen an outer palace disciple return alive after entering an inner palace disciple's training ground? That's simply impossible. Instead of spending your energy worrying about this, why don't you think about how to raise your own cultivation and not drag down the team's results?" Li Shengkai felt rather helpless when he heard the displeasure and impatience in Cheng Juanhe's words. In fact, he understood that Cheng Juanhe was telling the truth. However, for some reason, he couldn't help but feel worried. In his opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 weren't ordinary people. After all, what they did before wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Even so, what should we do if they return alive? Li Shengkai couldn't help but ask. He knew that he was indeed very useless. In the eyes of Cheng Juanhe and the others, he had become a coward. However, he really had an inexplicable premonition. It's impossible for them to return alive. Cheng Juanhe's voice was slightly cold. Ever since they tricked Bailey Hongzhuang's group into the inner palace disciples' training ground, Li Shengkai had always looked like his soul had left his body. When they were training, he made mistakes time and time again. If it weren't for their help, Li Shengkai would have lost his life long ago. He was already very dissatisfied with this. He did not expect that after returning to the outer hall, Li Shengkai would still be on tenterhooks about this matter. This made him feel even more disdainful. Such a teammate was too cowardly. After noticing the conversation between Li Shengkai and Cheng Juanhe, the other cultivators in the team could not help but speak up to advise them. "Li Shengkai, aren't you worrying too much? If they can really come back alive, then they're really lucky. Don't worry, they won't come back. Even if they do come back, you won't be the only one facing this disaster. Why are you so worried? I see that you've been distracted recently because you're worried about this matter. Why don't you go back and have a good rest? You'll be completely relieved tomorrow. Smiles appeared on everyone's faces. In their opinion, Li Shengkai had really become a coward. Although the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 in the outer hall was a little frightening, it was a little too cowardly to be under their shadow. Moreover, in their opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 had already become souls in the ground. Chapter 35:22. All along, he was the only one who was worried about this matter. Everyone in the team seemed to have believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were dead. However, he could not make everyone understand the premonition in his heart, so he could only be regarded as a coward by everyone. In fact, if he could, he really did not want to be involved in the matter of deceiving Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. However, things had already developed to this point. Although he regretted it a little, there was nothing he could do. Sigh, since you all don't believe it, perhaps I'm really overthinking it. Li Shengkai sighed. A strong sense of helplessness appeared on his face. He really hoped that this matter would be as everyone thought and that there would not be any twists and turns. Cheng Juanhe glanced at Li Shengkai coldly. His eyes were filled with a hint of warning. It's your own business to be worried, but if you dare to leak a word about this matter, you'll have to bear the consequences. Cheng Juanhe also had a certain amount of misgivings about the matter of setting up Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 behind their backs. No matter what, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were people that Master Long valued. Master Long had previously ordered them not to take revenge for the previous matter. If Master Long found out about this matter, it would be extremely detrimental to their future development. However, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 died quietly and they kept their mouths shut, they believed that no one else would know about this news. As soon as these words came out, the other cultivators also looked at Li Shengkai nervously. They were confident enough, but they could not help but worry about Li Shengkai's panic. Sensing everyone's gaze, Li Shengkai quickly nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely not leak this matter." Cheng Juanhe carefully observed Li Shengkai's expression before slowly retracting his gaze. If Li Shengkai was still the same as before, then he did not mind getting rid of him. At least, he could avoid more trouble. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others returned through the teleportation formation, they sighed in their hearts when they saw the 2 familiar teleportation formations. When they left previously, who would have thought that they would experience such a scene after entering the teleportation formation? Fortunately, they returned safely in the end, which really made them heave a sigh of relief. I'm finally back. A smile appeared on Shangguan Yingying's face. Standing there, the air seemed to be less stuffy, and she felt relaxed. The faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 also showed a smile. At least it was much safer here. Junior Brother D, we need to return to the inner hall to hand in the mission. We won't stay with you any longer. Ren Ziheng looked at Di Beichen and the other 3 and said slowly. Di Beichen nodded. All right, you guys can go ahead and do your work. Compared to the lax training of the Outer Palace disciples, every time the Inner Palace disciples headed to the training grounds, they would receive some missions and must complete the handover. The rules of the Inner Palace were much stricter than the Outer Palace disciples. After we're done with our business, we'll come and have a drink with you when we're free, Chu Jinfeng said with a smile. No problem. When Xiren laughed heartily, he lowered his voice and said to Chu Jinfeng, when you're done with your business, you must find me for a drink. Chapter 35:23. After Ren Ziheng and the others left, Duan Huali stopped in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. His handsome face was filled with a kind smile. Junior sister Bailey, if you can't handle the matter, you can come to the inner hall to find me. Thank you for your kindness, but I don't think it's necessary. Bailey Hongzhuang said faintly. This Duan Huali was obviously up to no good. She did not intend to give him the slightest chance to get close to her. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang still bluntly refused, Duan Huali raised his eyebrows and did not say anything more. The smile on his face was still there. Junior Sister Bailey, you don't have to be in a hurry to refuse. There will be a time when you need my help in the future. At this time, Di Beichun stepped forward and separated Bailey Hongzhuang and Duan Huali. He said, Senior Brother Duan, don't worry. I will naturally deal with my wife's matter. I don't need anyone else to intervene. His handsome face was filled with a faint confidence. Di Beichun, who was already outstanding, looked even more magnificent and dazzling at this moment. Standing in front of Duan Huali, his aura was even stronger than Duan Huali's. Seeing this scene, a hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of the surrounding people. It should be known that Duan Huali was also an influential figure in the inner hall. Whether it was his temperament or his aura, he was very outstanding. They did not expect that he would be suppressed by an outer hall disciple. It was really surprising. Duan Huali naturally also noticed this. He could not help but lose the smile on his face. He said coldly, Junior Brother Di is too confident. There are many talents in this Penglai Palace. Even if you have some ability, you should not be so arrogant. If this problem can't be solved in the end, it will be a joke. Hearing this, Di Beichun smiled faintly. Senior Brother Duan, you're worrying too much. I know you're kind-hearted, but I didn't expect you to be so concerned about someone else's wife. This is a little unnecessary. Duan Huali had repeatedly fawned over Bailey Hongzhuang, and Di Beichun had long been dissatisfied. Now that Duan Huali had done such a thing, Di Beichun naturally wouldn't be polite anymore. Following Di Beichun's words, the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. There were quite a few cultivators near the teleportation array. When they heard Di Beichun's words, they looked at Duan Huali with a strange expression. I've long heard that Duan Huali of the Inner Hall is a womanizer. I didn't expect him to have designs on someone else's wife. Isn't it a bit too low? Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance is the most outstanding. It's not surprising that Duan Huali has such thoughts. However, it's a bit too much to flirt with Di Beichun's wife so blatantly in front of him. Now there's a good show to watch. These two people are tit for tat. I don't know how Duan Huali will solve it. More and more cultivators gathered around, and their eyes were fixed on Di Beichun and Duan Huali, two very outstanding men. In terms of appearance, Duan Huali naturally lost to Di Beichun. However, Duan Huali's status in Penglai Palace was higher than Di Beichun's, so everyone was not sure who the final winner would be. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other, and a faint smile appeared in their eyes. Beichun is angry. Xiren and Di Beichun had been together for so many years, so he knew Di Beichun's character very well. Just by looking at the subtle expressions on Di Beichun's face, he could judge Di Beichun's real thoughts. Chapter 35-24. Junior D, what do you mean by that? Duan Huali's tone was cold, and his words were full of warning. He was indeed interested in Bailey Hongzhuang, but the moment when Di Beichun said it so bluntly, his face was obviously not as good as his. Don't tell me you still don't understand what I mean? What I said couldn't be any more obvious. A cold light appeared on Di Beichun's handsome face. He glanced at Duan Huali indifferently, and his eyes were vaguely filled with disgust. In the next second, he ignored Duan Huali, put his arm around Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder, and walked directly in the direction of the outer hall. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say anything either, and just left with Di Beichun. At a time like this, her man would naturally do whatever he wanted. Seeing this scene, Duan Huali stood in the same place, dumbfounded. He looked at the backs of the two people leaving, and his face was as gloomy as the bottom of a pot. Rin Ziheng and the others hadn't gone far when they discovered the conflict between Di Beichun and Duan Huali. At this moment, after seeing Di Beichun's domineering side, a trace of surprise and shock emerged in everyone's hearts. I didn't expect Di Beichun to be so domineering. He actually directly started a fight with Duan Huali. Chu Jinfeng sighed. Through his previous interaction with Di Beichun, he only felt that Di Beichun was a man who was like a spring breeze. Whether it was the way he spoke or the way he acted, he was very gentle. There was a big difference between his current domineering and awe-inspiring appearance. Duan Huali is really too much. Di Beichun has already revealed his identity, but he still harassed Bailey Hongzhuang time and time again. No matter who it was, I'm afraid they would be angry by now, Ren Zimei said. Ren Ziheng shook his head and said, "That's not necessarily true. If an ordinary person knew Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they probably wouldn't dare to speak up directly. However, Di Beichun clearly knew, and yet he still dared to do so. At least this proves that he's not an ordinary person. Junior D isn't the coward you think he is. This action is not out of my expectations at all," Jing Tianlang said. Chu Jinfeng sighed. "However, things have already reached this point. It's not easy to end it," Run Zimei nodded. "Don't be fooled by Duan Huali's usual generous appearance. In fact, he's a narrow-minded man. Now that Di Beichun has offended him so badly, he will definitely think of ways to teach Di Beichun a lesson. I'm afraid they won't have an easy time in the future. Since Junior D has done this, he must have thought of the consequences. Don't worry too much." Ren Ziheng said slowly, "No matter what, this is still the Penglai Palace. Even if Duan Huali wants to do something, he can't do it too blatantly. I still have to find a chance to remind Junior D and the others. If they don't take precautions, once they're tricked, it's really, did you see that?" Just now, Duan Huali's face had already turned into the color of pig liver. Just thinking about it makes me laugh. Xiao Hei held her stomach and giggled. Di Beichun's words just now really vented her anger. Chapter 35-25. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichun beside her. His handsome face exuded a charming charm, as always. His slightly pursed lips revealed a cold arc. Just by looking at Di Beichun's expression, she knew that Di Beichun was really angry. Di Beichun wouldn't care about ordinary things. However, as long as it was related to Bailey Hongzhuang, it was completely different. Perhaps other people would be thinking about how to solve the problem after offending Duan Huali. However, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a sweet feeling in her heart. Even though she already knew how important she was in Di Beichun's heart, she still felt very sweet when she saw how much Di Beichun cared about her. As for Duan Huali, Bailey Hongzhuang had long forgotten about him. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly held Di Beichun's hand. Their fingers interlocked, and a faint smile appeared on her pretty face. Di Beichun was originally in a bad mood. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang's small action, the cold arc on his lips relaxed slightly and faintly rose. Duan Huali's face was already extremely ugly. The surrounding people's discussions and strange gazes made him feel even more embarrassed. Thinking about how he, Duan Huali, was famous in the inner hall, there were very few people who dared to embarrass him like this. He only felt an indescribable anger rising from his bones. He couldn't wait to tear Di Beichun into pieces. Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali, standing in the same place. He couldn't help but walk to his side and say, "It's getting late. Let's go back." It didn't feel good to continue to stay here and be looked at by everyone. Although the target of everyone's attention was Duan Huali, Peng Kairui, as his teammate, was also very embarrassed. As Peng Kairui's voice fell, Duan Huali recovered from his anger. He looked at the surrounding people who were looking at him. The anger on his face couldn't help but become more vigorous. "What are you looking at? Get out of here." Hearing Duan Huali's furious roar, the surrounding cultivators were all stunned. Immediately, they didn't dare to listen and scattered in all directions. With Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they didn't dare to easily offend him. After all, with the former's means, it was undoubtedly easy to deal with them. However, Duan Huali's angry expression made them even more sure that what Di Beichun said before was true. Otherwise, Duan Huali wouldn't have been so angry. After the surrounding cultivators left one after another, Duan Huali then turned to look at Peng Kairui and the others. Peng Kairui and the others also restrained their expressions. They didn't want to anger Duan Huali at this time. "Let's go," Duan Huali said coldly. He needed to go back and think of a way to deal with Di Beichun. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and immediately followed Duan Huali to the inner hall. They had stayed in the training ground for such a long time and were already very tired. Now, they really wanted to go back and have a good rest to recover their energy. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three returned to the outer hall, many cultivators' eyes fell on them. Speaking of which, although they had just arrived in the outer hall, they were indeed influential figures in the outer hall. Chapter 35-26. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are back. Recently, I haven't seen any traces of them, nor have they appeared in the training grounds. I was wondering where they had gone. I'm not sure. The four of them are always alone in the outer hall. Who knows what they've been up to? Numerous gazes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, everyone could still see that they were travel-worn and somewhat disheveled. It was obvious that they had experienced something before. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked around the outer hall for a while, then immediately walked straight to Li Shunkai's residence. Speaking of which, it was all thanks to Li Shunkai telling them where he lived. Otherwise, they would have to put in a lot of effort to find Li Shunkai. I wonder if Li Shunkai has returned yet. Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with a thoughtful light. If he hasn't returned yet, we'll just wait here in the outer hall. We must wait for him to return. Seeing Shangguan Yingying's look of wanting to tear Li Shunkai into pieces, a smile appeared on the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Don't worry. As long as Li Shunkai is still alive, we'll definitely get our revenge, Bailey Hongzhuang said with a faint smile. Li Shunkai's actions were indeed overboard, but after experiencing the training grounds in the inner hall, she felt that this was a very good harvest. At least, Li Shunkai's scheme did not succeed. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three arrived at Li Shunkai's residence, they happened to see Li Shunkai and some others standing in front of the building. After listening carefully, they realized that Li Shunkai and the others were talking about the four of them. "I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you," Di Beichun's voice slowly sounded. As Di Beichun's voice fell, Li Shunkai, Cheng Juanhe, and the others who were talking could not help but be stunned. Just as they were wondering where the voice came from, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three menacingly approaching. Li Shunkai and the others could not help but be stunned when they saw them. They stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, and a look of disbelief quickly climbed onto their faces. Why are you here?" Li Shunkai could not help but ask. "Why can't we be here?" Xiren's lips curled into a playful smile as he asked. Li Shunkai's face turned pale. What he was most worried about had happened. Cheng Juanhe and the others froze in place, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others standing in front of them in disbelief. The word impossible kept appearing in their minds. Impossible? How did you come back alive? Cheng Juanhe's face was filled with disbelief. According to his judgment, as long as an outer hall disciple entered the training grounds of inner hall disciples, there was only a path to death. For so many years, there had never been such an accident. He had seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three enter the teleportation formation of the inner hall with his own eyes. How could they appear here alive? This was something that was simply impossible to happen. Cheng Juanhe could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. This possibility had never appeared in his mind before. Hearing Cheng Juanhe's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's gazes fell on him. Chapter 35-27. Is it that hard to believe that we came back alive? The corners of Shangguan Yingying's lips curled into a cold smile as she looked at Cheng Juanhe. If they didn't know much about Cheng Juanhe before, then looking at Cheng Juanhe's reaction now, they knew that Cheng Juanhe was definitely a member of this conspiracy. In fact, it was very likely that he was the initiator of this conspiracy. After all, Cheng Juanhe was the first to answer their question about the teleportation portal. This proved that Cheng Juanhe was the first to plot against them. Master, do we know this Cheng Juanhe? Why would he plot against us behind our backs? Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with confusion. For what he could remember, they did not have any interactions with Cheng Juanhe. He should not have any reason to plot against them like this. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. She also did not have any impression of Cheng Juanhe. She was not sure why he would do this. Come to think of it, he is very likely one of the cultivators who went against us back then. Perhaps his cultivation level has decreased a lot, so he secretly hates us. If that's the case, this matter can be explained. Di Beichun slowly said into Bailey Hongzhuang's ear. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked up and met Di Beichun's deep and wise eyes. She thought about it secretly and realized that Di Beichun's words made a lot of sense. There were too many cultivators who went against them back then. Even though many of them had fallen, there were still many left. She had some impression of many cultivators, but it was impossible for her to remember all of them. Therefore, it was normal for her to overlook some things. If Cheng Juanhe was one of the cultivators, then the enmity between the two of them would not be ordinary. Why do we care so much about him? Shangwan Yingying was very calm. Anyway, we just need to know that he is our enemy. As for why he did this, it doesn't matter to us. As Shangwan Yingying's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded in unison. This was the truth. In any case, the enmity between them had already reached an irreconcilable level. It seemed that only when the other party paid a sufficient price would it be completely resolved. Cheng Juanhe and the others glanced at each other, and they seemed as if they'd seen a ghost. According to their knowledge, there was no example of an outer palace disciple coming back alive after entering the training grounds of the inner palace disciples. What should we do now? Li Shengkai couldn't help but look at Cheng Juanhe. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three fought in the outer hall, he knew how powerful they were. He knew that his strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As long as the four of them wanted to kill him, he would not be able to resist. Most importantly, he didn't want to die at all. Now, he regretted it to the extreme. If he had known that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would be able to return alive, he would not have joined Cheng Juanhe and the others in this conspiracy. Now, he was completely dragged into the water. When he thought about the terrifying combat power of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he knew that even if everyone here joined forces, they would still not be a match for them. At the thought of this, Li Shengkai felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Cold sweat began to form on his back. Chapter 35:28. It was not just Li Shengkai and Cheng Juanhe. The other cultivators in the group were also pale. They could not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four could come back alive after entering such a dangerous place. Even though they were filled with regret, there was no medicine for regret at this moment. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines, and their minds were in a mess. They did not know how to react. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four is too strange. Previously, so many people went against them, but they didn't die. This time, they actually came out alive from the training ground of the inner palace disciples. I really don't know how they did it. A cultivator could not help but sigh. His words were filled with disbelief. He only felt that all the common sense that they originally understood had become illogical after encountering Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. It was clearly something that could not be broken, but it became an accident when they encountered them. I don't know. These four people are just too strange. I'm afraid we're one step behind. If we knew this would happen, we wouldn't have targeted them before. Now we're in big trouble, everyone whispered. Their hearts were filled with annoyance and regret. At this moment, they were even more afraid. Li Shengkai, no matter what, we've known each other before. I didn't expect you to give us such a big gift. We'll have to return it to you properly. Xiren looked at Li Shengkai with a faint smile. Although the smile on his face was as gentle as a spring breeze, anyone could hear the cold, murderous intent in his words. Li Shengkai's expression was extremely ugly. He really did not want to fight Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four head-on because he had no confidence in his own strength. He believed that any cultivator who had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four in action would not have the confidence to fight them head-on because the four of them were completely abnormal. If Bailey Hongzhuang poisoned him, he would really want to cry, but no tears would come out. Junior Brother 1, this matter? There might be a misunderstanding. Li Shengkai stammered. Misunderstanding? Xiren chuckled. I'd like to know what kind of misunderstanding it is. You wouldn't be trying to tell us that you've been in the Outer Palace for such a long time. Yet you've even forgotten which teleportation formation to head to the training grounds of the Outer Palace disciples, right? Shangguan Yingying looked at Li Shengkai mockingly. She felt that what Li Shengkai said was a complete joke. He clearly remembered that when they came to report, Li Shengkai had clearly told them that he had been in the Outer Hall for a very long time. So he knew the matters of the Outer Hall very well. If he told them this now, no one would believe him. Li Shengkai was a little embarrassed. He only felt that his mind was blank. He wanted to cover up this matter, but he found that he couldn't find a reason to lie at all. In fact, if this was said, no one would believe it, let alone Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. For a moment, Li Shengkai and the others fell silent. They were constantly thinking about what to do. Cheng Juan's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. He hated the four of them to the bone. If it were not for them, his cultivation would not have dropped so much. Chapter 35-29. The appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four had already attracted a lot of attention. Now that they had a conflict with Li Shengkai's group, it naturally became the matter that everyone was most concerned about. What's going on? Why are Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four fighting with Li Shengkai's group again? The four of them are really stirring up trouble one after another. From what I heard from their conversation, it seems that Li Shengkai's group tricked Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four into going to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four has come looking for them. No way. We've all heard about how dangerous the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples are. It's said that as long as an Outer Palace disciple goes there, they won't be able to come back alive. How did Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four do it? In that case, Li Shengkai's group is really ruthless. They want to kill Bailey Hongzhuang's group. If I came back alive, I would definitely come looking for trouble with them. It's normal. Didn't you see Cheng Junhe in the group? In my opinion, this is most likely Cheng Junhe's idea. His cultivation was originally close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm. Now, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison, he has fallen to the 6th level of the Purple Realm. It's said that there's not much hope for him to enter the Inner Palace, so it's not strange for him to do this. Bailey Hongzhuang's group, who didn't know much about the specific situation, understood the whole story after hearing the crowd's discussion. It turned out that Cheng Junhe's cultivation had regressed so much because of them. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichun, saying, "It seems that your analysis is completely correct." Di Beichun smiled faintly. Of course. Junior Brother 1, it's indeed my fault in this matter. I apologize to you. Li Shengkai braced himself and said. He understood that it was humiliating to say such words, but it was nothing compared to losing his life. As soon as these words were spoken, when Xiren couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You almost took our lives, yet you're trying to brush this matter aside with a casual apology? Isn't it a little too easy?" The awkwardness on Li Shengkai's face deepened. Looking at Xiren's aggressive eyes, he didn't know how to respond. In fact, he knew very well that no matter what he said at this time, it would be useless. "I didn't think that you would be able to come back alive. It seems that your luck is really good." Cheng Junhe looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He knew very well that there was no turning back. Since that was the case, he might as well admit it openly and honestly. Cowering would only be more embarrassing. "Good luck." Di Beichun smirked. If everyone knew what they had gone through, they wouldn't think that they were just lucky. Isn't that the case? Cheng Junhe sneered. "The heavens are really blind. They should have just let you die in the training ground of the Inner Hall disciples." As soon as Cheng Junhe finished speaking, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 turned cold. A strong, murderous aura exploded from their bodies. Only ghosts knew what they had gone through, and it was all thanks to Chung Juinha. Chapter 35:30. Shangguan Yingying found Chung Juinha's anger very funny. Ever since they joined the Penglai Palace, they had always been in a defensive position and had never taken the initiative to attack others. However, everyone had never intended to let them go and had constantly coveted their things, resulting in such a result. However, Chung Juinha was now pushing all the blame onto them. It was simply too laughable. Everyone knew that Shangguan Yingying was right, but Chung Juinha did not take this matter to heart. In his opinion, the reason why his cultivation had become what it was today was all thanks to Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, this hatred must be blamed on Bailey Hongzhuang. What do you want now? Chung Juinha's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichin. His eyes flashed with a cold chill and a faint murderous intent, but more than that, there was still fear. Don't you know what we want? Deep Beichin asked back. Hearing this, Chung Juinha looked at Deep Beichin in surprise and doubt. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. He still did not believe that Deep Beichin and the other 3 would dare to take their lives here. I did plot against you behind your backs, but if you make a big deal out of this now, it will not end well for you or for us. Chung Juinha looked at the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. This could be considered a personal grudge between them. Last time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others caused too much of a sensation in the outer hall. Although they were not punished later, they must have been warned by Master Long. If the 4 of them had just returned and caused a big conflict, it would be difficult for them to explain to Master Long. Therefore, he could only put his hope on this point. As long as they had some considerations, then there was still a chance for things to turn around. At least, as long as they did not take action now, he still had hoped to find others to help. It was much better than only them dealing with it. Are you threatening us? Bailey Hongzhuang's cold gaze landed on Chung Juinha's face. Her slightly raised lips revealed a hint of mockery and amusement, but more importantly, a hint of mockery. Chung Juinha was slightly stunned by Bailey Hongzhuang's straightforwardness. Yes, his words did contain some threat, but now that Bailey Hongzhuang said it out loud, he felt that his threat seemed to have lessened. You should know that although the outer hall does not prevent conflicts between cultivators, what you did last time has already angered everyone. If you continue to do this now, it will not be beneficial to your future development in the Penglai Palace. Chung Juinha continued. At this point, he could only use this method to make Bailey Hongzhuang and the others change their minds because he was not confident that he could defeat them. If that's the case, then I have to thank you for reminding us of this. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and the mockery in her eyes became more intense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask the others. Chung Juinha forced himself to say. However, in the next moment, Deep Beichin had already kicked Chung Juinha. Bang! Chapter 35:31. Do we look like people who are afraid of trouble? Deep Beichin looked at Chung Juinha coldly. Today, we're here to take your lives. Deep Beichin's sudden kick stunned everyone present. No one expected him to make such a clean move without any scruples at all. Chung Juinha stared blankly at Deep Beichin, who was looking down at him from above. He couldn't come back to his senses for a while. His analysis was obviously not wrong at all. Logically speaking, any cultivator would hesitate in such a situation. However, Deep Beichin was so decisive, which really exceeded his expectations. Deep Beichin, you! Chung Juinha shouted angrily as he quickly got up from the ground. Being kicked to the ground by the other party really made him lose face. You what? Xiren looked at Chung Juinha coldly. You damn guys, just wait to die. From a moment they decided to take revenge, they had already made up their minds. As long as they were still alive, Chung Juinha and the others would definitely die. As Xiren's voice fell, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly changed. The temperature quickly dropped, and Li Shengkai and the others felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. In the next moment, without waiting for Li Shengkai and the others to speak, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three started to move without hesitation. After a whole night's rest yesterday, they had all recovered to their peak condition. Although Li Shengkai's team had a total of 8 people, they were no threat to them. Moreover, after experiencing being surrounded by the skeleton army, the advantage in numbers was no longer important to them. Vigorous Yuanqi burst out from the bodies of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. They had already chosen their respective targets and immediately attacked each other agilely. Li Shengkai and the others were stunned. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to immediately take action. They didn't care about Cheng Juan's previous persuasion at all. However, there were also cultivators with rich combat power. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 take action, they also went up to meet them. The battle broke out at this moment. Bang, bang, bang. The vigorous elemental energy mixed with the strong and ferocious strength constantly collided. The energy that spread out in all directions even shot out small holes that were almost 10 centimeters long on the ground. 12 people were entangled. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 only had 4 people, they still didn't fall into a disadvantageous position in a 1 versus 2 situation. At the sight of this, the surrounding cultivators who were watching the fight suddenly had interesting expressions on their faces. Such a good show suddenly happened. For them, it was a liveliness that they couldn't miss. The strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to 4. They have just joined the Penglai Palace, but they are able to fight against 2. You know that Cheng Juanhe and the others have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years. They have been cultivators who have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years. Their strength is indeed terrifying. Judging from this strength, I'm afraid they will definitely be members of the Inner Hall in the future. Fortunately, their contract beasts have just been contracted. If the strength of the contract beasts increases, then their combat power will be even more terrifying. Chapter 35-32. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had caused such a huge commotion in the outer hall that everyone already knew that they couldn't treat them as ordinary new disciples. However, many people still didn't know their true strength and had only heard about it from others. Now that they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 make a move, they could be considered to have witnessed the strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 with their own eyes. Among Li Shengkai's group, Cheng Juan's strength was the strongest. He was at the 6th level of the Purple Realm and was much stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Di Beichun didn't hesitate to confront Cheng Juanhe. He saw that this guy was very unhappy. First, he had silently schemed against them behind their backs, and then he had come up with all these messy reasons to make them give up. He wasn't stupid and couldn't be more clear about what Cheng Juanhe was thinking. If they had hesitated just now and chosen to deal with Cheng Juanhe and the others later, then Cheng Juanhe would have turned around and contacted the other disciples. At that time, the cultivators they would have to face wouldn't be as simple as the 8 people in front of them. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to make a move and didn't give this matter any leeway. Perhaps they had brought some trouble to Master Long this time, but there were some things that had to be done. If the other party schemed against them and they could still act as if nothing had happened, then that would be a real joke. Cheng Juanhe had fought with Di Beichun before, so he was very familiar with Di Beichun's strength. Back then, when his strength was close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm, he had given Di Beichun a lot of pressure when dealing with Di Beichun. However, his cultivation was now only at the 6th level of the Purple Realm. Once Di Beichun used his blood aura, the difference in strength between them would no longer exist. On the contrary, his strength would be inferior to Di Beichun's. This was a very sullen situation. His strength had been declining for a while, but until now, he still hadn't recovered from this drop. Now that his opponent was right in front of him, he didn't have any chance of winning. This feeling made him even more uncomfortable. Di Beichun, aren't you afraid that Master Long will blame you for doing this? Cheng Juanhe couldn't help but ask when he saw Di Beichun closing in on them. Hearing this, Di Beichun chuckled and said, Master Long said that the previous matter was over, and no one was to play any tricks behind his back. Didn't you do the same? Now that you're asking me this question, isn't it a bit too ridiculous? Or do you think I'm not as courageous as you? Previously, I did go overboard by plotting against you behind your backs. However, if this continues, it won't benefit either of us. Why don't we think of another way to resolve this matter? Ever since he fought with Di Beichun, Chang Juanhe understood the gap between them. If Di Beichun really wanted to take his life, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the sun tomorrow. Under such circumstances, Chang Juanhe could only compromise. As long as Di Beichun agreed to let them go, then no matter what the conditions were, as long as it was something he could do, he wouldn't hesitate. Oh! Di Beichun raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his lips curled up a little. Then what other way do you think we can resolve this matter? Chapter 35-33. Seeing that Di Beichun had relented, Chang Juanhe could not help but feel delighted. What he was most worried about was that Di Beichun was unwilling to relent. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, any price would be much better than losing his life. At the same time, Li Shengkai, whom Bailey Hongzhuang was dealing with, was also begging for mercy. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's attack, he could only retreat step by step. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was closing in on him, leaving him with no way out. He was also very aggrieved. Logically speaking, he should be stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang, but Bailey Hongzhuang was a completely abnormal existence. Without using the blood aura field, his combat strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, which made him feel frustrated. Junior sister Bailey, I didn't want to lie to you before. Li Shengkai begged for mercy while dodging Bailey Hongzhuang's attack. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was still cold. We treated you as a friend, so we believe what you said just now. We didn't expect you to trick us like this. Hearing this, Li Shengkai's expression turned ugly. Chang Juanhe threatened me. I had no choice. You guys are teammates. Do you think I'll believe you? Bailey Hongzhuang sneered, but in her heart, she looked down on Li Shengkai even more. At a time like this, he even betrayed his teammates. This guy was indeed not a trustworthy person. Speaking of which, it was not a bad thing that they could use this opportunity to understand what kind of person Li Shengkai was. Otherwise, if they trusted Li Shengkai in more serious matters in the future, they would probably suffer a greater loss. I'm telling the truth. Li Shengkai was also suffering. If he had not been forced to tell such a lie by Chang Juanhe, he would not have had the heart to deceive Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Now, what he regretted the most was that he did not tell Bailey Hongzhuang the truth back then. Then, he would not be in such a situation now. On the contrary, he was very likely to get Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three allies, which would be of great help to him. Unfortunately, a single slip would cause everlasting regret. No matter how much he regretted it now, it was useless. It's meaningless for you to say this now. Since you want to take our lives, you should have been prepared to lose your life. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face was filled with indifference. She had no sympathy for Li Shengkai at all. She raised her hand and attacked Li Shengkai's vital points. Junior sister Bailey, I beg you, please forgive me this time. I'll never do anything to deceive you in the future. Although Li Shengkai tried his best to dodge, more and more wounds appeared on his body. He was no match for Bailey Hongzhuang in the first place. In addition, he had already lost his fighting spirit. Naturally, the situation was getting worse and worse. In the future, no matter what you ask me to do, I'll do whatever you say. How about you let me live? Li Shengkai kept begging for mercy. The wounds on his body kept hurting him. He had a hunch that if this continued, he would disappear from this world soon. It was not easy for him to get to this point. He did not want to lose his life just like that. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about what Li Shengkai said. Once disloyal, 100 times would not be tolerated. Li Shengkai's words could no longer convince them. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.